Previously on Serial.
And I'll just open by saying what I told our football team tonight at halftime and after the game, that we're not a very good football team right now, obviously.
I just want to say I made a very poor decision talking about things outside the building.
When you bench your franchise quarterback and you bench him with 2 games to go in favor of a player who has not started in the NFL since 2010, you are sending a loud and unmistakable message that nobody is safe.
This is a Global Tel Link prepaid call from
Jay Cutler.
an inmate at Hollis Hall. This call may be recorded and monitored. If you wish to block any piece of the call, feel free to use your privacy setting.
In December 2014, a football team is murdered. No one knows exactly who. No one knows exactly when it happened. But they were murdered. Dead. Hearts on the ground. Lungs everywhere. Bleeding. That was the 2014 Chicago Bears. Today we examine who killed the Bears. Was it the coach? Was it the quarterback? Was it the defense? The Green Bay Packers, the New England Patriots, Aaron Rodgers? Or was it the GM? Phil Emery and his brain trust and hipster doofus glasses. Today on Serial, we examine what it looks like when a football team is murdered. This is Serial, presented by Barstool Sports. To understand how a football team is murdered, we first have to understand how a football team is born. The 2014 Chicago Bears were actually born on the last day of 2012. It was on that day that general manager Phil Emery fired longtime head coach Lovie Smith after a 10-6 season that saw the Bears on the outside looking in on the NFL playoffs. It was at that exact moment that the Chicago Bears' history would change forever, because it was at that exact moment that the wheels began in motion for the first ever homicide of a football team. The search for a new football coach began almost immediately, and it covered foreign lands many of us didn't even know had the game of football, namely Canada. And it was from this cold, friendly, barren land covered in maple syrup and red flannels that a new football coach emerged. Bruce Arians? Mike Zimmer? Darrell Bevell? No. It was a man named Mark Trestman. Mark with a C. From America's Hat.
On behalf of the McCaskey family, the Chicago Bears, and this great city and our great fans, I'd like to introduce to you Mark Trestman, head football coach, Chicago Bears.
And he preached practice, 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 more practice, and even more practice on top of that practice.
And we will practice. We will practice all of this, and we will practice fast.
And in 2013, that practice bred results. Results might be a strong word, actually, here. The practice bred an 8-8 season that was lost to the Green Bay Packers on Week 17. But more than anything, it created hope. An offense that went from 16th to 2nd. A quarterback whisperer who whispered in not one, but 2 quarterbacks' ears. A defense that was historically bad, but ultimately fixable, and a system that worked. It's not that the 2013 Chicago Bears were good. They weren't. It's that the 2013 Chicago Bears cracked open a window in which a championship would emerge. A window no one knew at the time would allow our murderer to silently slip in, under the cover of false statistics, and murder everything in sight. So we know the who and the what. We've established a crime place. A football team was murdered. But why? And by who? Well, let's start from the beginning of the 2014 season. I've talked to various players. Some of them wanted to stay off the record. Some of them didn't want to hear their voices heard on this podcast. And they all have told me they remember when they were alive. They remember breathing, seeing, smelling. They remember that some people called them dead after week 1 against Buffalo or week 4 against the Green Bay Packers. But to a man, they say they specifically remember where they were after those games. And I've fact-checked those, and all of their alibis check out. They were all still living and breathing. They were all still alive. For instance, here's Jay Cutler after week 4's loss to the Packers.
It's early in the season. There's a lot of good things happening in this game. We've got a lot of football left to play. Get some guys back healthy again, hopefully, and keep moving along.
Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm a fat blogger trying to find out who killed the football team. But to me, that sounds like there's still life. It sounded like a man who twisted his ankle in a game of pickup hoops. It's probably worse than he realizes, but to the outside world, he'll simply walk it off. The Bears were walking off their imminent death. For another analogy, it's like a tourist who stumbles into the wrong neighborhood late at night, turns to his wife and says, "Honey, maybe we should turn back before we get our lives stolen." But they couldn't. They couldn't turn back. And they kept trudging on to a loss against the Dolphins, onto a date in New England, and a 51-23 loss that saw the self-inflicted wound of Lamar Houston.
Garoppolo being rushed. Oh, down he goes, first sack of the game. Lamar Houston. But Lamar, let's not go overboard on the celebration.
I think he's hurt. He should have been watching Steven tell it.
"Hey, honey, look, I just did a sack. I'm dead." Would that cause the death of the Bears? Oh, no. The 2014 Chicago Bears were a very compliant football team. That's a word we heard a lot. That's a word that rang in our ears. That's a word that has no real meaning outside of the word just being said when it comes to a professional football team, but it was said, and it was said a lot.
They prepare very hard. They're a very compliant football team, and they're doing everything we ask them to do. And so we start with that baseline, and then we'll work from there.
Winning, being good, executing plays, all those things seem like good ideas in theory, but what does it all matter when you don't have compliance, right? And the Bears were compliant, like a dog that sits when you tell it to and then shits on the floor the second you leave the house. That was the 2014 Chicago Bears. Good boy, Fido. Here's a treat. Meanwhile, Fido is out back humping the neighbor's kids and chasing a cat up a tree. Those are the type of dogs that eventually get out and run into the street, only to get hit by a truck driven by a douchey quarterback from a hick town who still thinks finger pistols and photobombs are LOL funny. Stay tuned on Serial after the bye week.
It's on 3rd and 10. Floats it out to the end zone. One-handed grab. And Aaron Rodgers ties a Packer record with his 6th touchdown.
I want to talk for a moment about the defense. I've talked to witnesses, people who understand defenses, experts who have spent their life studying how a defense works. And they've all come to the same independent conclusion. The 2014 Chicago Bears defense was a tire fire. Only if a tire fire had a nuclear bomb dropped on it every hour on the hour for the rest of eternity. Here's some evidence I've dug up that may sway your opinion, even though your opinion should be that the defense sucks because you have eyes and a brain. Anyway, here are some statistics I was able to uncover. The Chicago Bears versus top quarterbacks in the year 2014. Aaron Rodgers, 617 yards, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That was 2 games. Ryan Tannehill, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Tom Brady, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Matthew Stafford, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Drew Brees, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. When you add up all those guys, they had a quarterback rating of 144.1, 22 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. I'm not an expert, but I would say that's probably not very good. I do have an expert, though. I was able to get on the phone with Mel Tucker, defensive coordinator of the Bears, and ask him about the defense this past season. Mel, thanks for talking to me. What in your mind do you think was wrong with the defense?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that we need to get corrected. You know, we need to challenge balls better. We need to get a better, more consistent pass rush on the quarterback. We got to do a better job in man, and we got to do a better job breaking on the ball in zone. We got to do a much better job of recognizing play action. You know, those are 4 or 5 things right there that will improve our pass defense.
So what you're saying is the defense is the worst defense of all time and should be quote unquote murdered? Your words, not mine.
And that's pretty much what it is.
To give you a better picture of what this Bears defense has looked like, close your eyes. Imagine a man who's been at the bar all day. Shots, beers, mixed drinks, cigarettes. It's 2:30 a.m. He's had about 35 drinks, and he hasn't had anything to eat. Now imagine this same man trying to run stride for stride with a world-class athlete who clocks in at 4.640. The Bears defense, if you couldn't tell, is the drunk guy. He's the drunk guy who stumbles, trips on his cheap knockoff alligator shoes, rips his Tommy Bahama shirt, then pukes buffalo wings and nachos in the alley. I've been that guy. You've been that guy. And the Bears were that guy for an entire season. Does that mean the offense isn't to blame? Of course not. And we'll get to that in a second. But if you put Oregon's offense versus the Bears defense, I would bet my life on Oregon's offense. Then watch as the Bears defense pass out on the shitter with their pants around their ankles and diarrhea in the toilet. Is that a crass explanation for it? Yeah, probably, but it's spot on.
I just want to say I made a very poor decision of talking about things outside the building.
Left a key piece of the story out on purpose. I didn't want everyone to prejudge. But now that we're approaching an answer, I'm going to lay out all the evidence, like coats being hung on a coat rack. Instead of using names, I'll just say suspects, because right now it's still an open case. The offense of the 2014 Chicago Bears has been bad, very bad. And the problem is they were supposed to be good, very good. Sorry if this is going too fast for some of you. Anyway, the problem lies with 4 different suspects. Here's their cases. Suspect 1, a mercurial quarterback who leads the league in turnovers, has never taken that elusive next step and is publicly being tried and convicted as the homicidal maniac of the Bears.
You know, certain games you play well, certain games I didn't play well. Overall, I mean, whenever you only win 5 games, the quarterback, like I said, I think I said it either last week or the week before. The quarterback has a lot to do with wins and losses in this league, this league, this day and age. So, only win 5 games. A lot of that's going to be on me.
Suspect 2, a group of large men whose sole purpose is to work as accomplices with Suspect 1, to protect Suspect 1, make sure Suspect 1 stays out of harm's way. They've failed 37 times this year. They also have been unable to get any sort of consistent running game going. Plainly put, Suspect 2, or hypothetically speaking, the offensive line, flat out stinks. Suspect 3. Suspect 3 is an interesting case study because Suspect 3 was the first to come forward and explain that a murder had taken place.
I just want to say I made a very poor decision of talking about things outside the building, and I admit that, and can't take that back. But I recognize that I made a mistake, and when I did, it instantly went right to the offensive unit, our group, and apologized to the offense, as well as apologized to Jay in front of the offense that he was singled out in the situation.
Now, usually when I make a mistake, the last thing I want to do is come out and admit it. So what was Suspect 3's motive? Was he doing this to protect himself? Was he doing this to frame suspect one? Was he getting out in front of the story before the story controlled him? I spoke to a person who has dealt with situations like this. He didn't want to be recorded, but he simply said, under these circumstances, alert the media and then you control the story. Wait for them to find out and the story controls you. That's what happened to OJ. And maybe that's exactly what Suspect 3 was doing. No one will know for sure, but we do know is Suspect 3 cannot be trusted under any circumstances. Even if he stands in front of you, cries, and throws apologies in your face. His story needs to be taken with a mountain of salt. Suspect 4. You know the guy at the party that doesn't talk a lot? Or the neighbor who everyone stays away from? Housewives hold their children just a little bit closer when they run into him at the grocery store. That's Suspect 4. He hasn't committed a single crime in his life. To the contrary, actually, he lives a squeaky clean existence with his hat pulled down and his glasses on. But something about him seems off. Talking about practice, growing the man, addressing people from the back of a room while no one is listening. If you were invited into Suspect 4's home, I would guess he has furniture covered in plastic and never turns on his TV. Probably has a bird feeder he's been carving for the last 5 years. Never enters a room without testing the light switches. A meticulous thinker for sure, but maybe too meticulous. Maybe so meticulous he didn't even realize he murdered the bears until they were already dead. Thought they were alive when in reality they had been dead for weeks on weeks. Buried. Gone. So now that we have everything laid out, the question remains, who did it? Who murdered this team? There are many things we likely know, but maybe we'll never know for sure. Maybe we'll never get a straight answer. Maybe it was all of these men in a grand conspiracy to depress and corrupt the city of Chicago and its loyal fan base. A deliberate attack to put the Grabowskis of the world in an early grave. Some may even argue this was a mercy killing, a killing that was just and needed to happen. But at the end of the day, we know this. A murder took place. The 2014 Chicago Bears are dead. We have leads. We have people who were at the scene of the crime. We have suspects. We may never know a specific name, and that might be the greatest mystery of all. Next week on Serial, we'll look at whether Jimmy Clausen is a long-term answer for the Chicago Bears. Actually, fuck that. You already know the answer. He's awful, and the Bears are going to lose by 1 million.
Clausen to throw, looking left side,